Welcome, Congressman Guy Reschenthaler of the 14th Congressional District. It's so good to talk to you, and I know everyone loves hearing what you have to say, and they've really been enjoying these updates from you, so thank you.
Well, Rose, thanks for having me back on. I really appreciate it. And there's a lot to talk about when we talk about updates. It's been very hectic in the news lately.
Do you mind if we talk about former Vice President Joe Biden for a while here?
Yeah, no, not at all, Rose.
Thank you. Because I mean, when I just think how, when we're looking at this unrest and we're looking at the economy that's taken a nosedive as a result of COVID and the tragedy surrounding that, and now all of this. I mean, and you think about the poor businessman out there who's had to endure 4 months without conducting business, and just as it looks like things are going to get back to somewhat normal, now they're being looted and their businesses are being destroyed, physically destroyed. I mean, how much more can they endure? So when you look at them and you look at the unrest and you look at everything that's going on in this country right now, is it really Joe Biden who's going to come in and make it all better?
No, Joe Biden is still in his basement shooting videos. It truly shows you the difference between these two candidates. You have President Trump, who's out there actually leading. He's being proactive. He's taking strong stances. And you have Joe Biden, who's being hidden away in his basement. We know who we want to be the leader for the next 4 years. Clearly, for me, that's President Trump, not Joe Biden. The man, again, he's showing his true colors by not coming out, by being hidden away and being kept in the basement. The public is onto it, though. The Biden team can't get away with this much longer. They're too smart for that. They recognize that he's being kept away and hidden.
It's interesting because we don't have to go into a lot of detail here, but the president visited St. John's Church. That is an iconic church in Washington. Presidents have gone to church there and their services there. And Joe Biden called Trump a narcissist for going in there. Let me ask you something. What should a president do? What should a president do when a church has been set afire that has been attended by so many others? It's iconic. It's an iconic church. And I don't know, it's like no matter what this president does, it's going to be wrong.
Well, again, it shows you that the left will politicize anything. President Trump was there to pay respects, that it was a church that had come under attack, so to speak. So he was there to really help the nation heal and build and get through this. He was there to be encouraging. And Joe Biden is hiding in his basement, taking cheap shots at this president. It's time for Joe Biden to come out of the basement, get on the campaign trail, stop hiding away in your basement and taking cheap shots at the president who's trying to heal. And President Trump's response to this has been correct. He is a candidate that's for law and order. He's a president that's for law and order. The fact that he reached out to so many of these governors saying, look, if you need it, the National Guard can be here because we've got to stop these riots. We've got to stop the looting, especially as we have these businesses that are coming back from being just decimated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So President Trump should be applauded. And my heart goes out to these business owners who had to deal with these draconian shutdowns and then turn around and they get looted.
I have to ask you something too, when we talk about the draconian measures that were taken by some governors. In the past, Congressman, I've even said, or even thought to myself, you look at Venezuela and you think, how could you let this happen? Or you look at, other countries and you say that, and then you realize, wait a minute. I mean, it happened to us in Pennsylvania and other blue states. It actually can happen so fast. And that's why it's so important that when we go to vote, it's not just for president. And you have to keep these things in consideration when we go to vote.
Well, when you were talking about what could happen here, what can happen, look at Venezuela. That was a democracy until Chavez took it over. It's happening right now in Hong Kong. Democracy. We're only one generation away at any given time from losing democracy. And last year, I was in Hong Kong. I was talking to the American Chamber of Congress there. I was talking to a bunch of Hong Kongers who are business owners, et cetera. And seeing what they were dealing with should scare all of us, because Hong Kong was, until very recently, and literally days ago, was a freer economy than the United States. It's part of the British Commonwealth. They have a common law system, much like we do. They vote. They have a they call it's a council with a chief executive officer, kind of like a governor of that city state. But by all intents and purposes, that was a democracy. And what really upset me when I was in Hong Kong was that the American press and the Hong Kong press were engaging in what they called self-censorship. So that really disturbs me, because when you have a free press that starts to self-censor, that's problematic. When you have American businesses and corporations that start to give concessions to the Chinese Communist Party so they can retain a foothold in Hong Kong, that's what really brought this about. And when you appease a communist regime, when you appease a tyrant, they get bolder, and they certainly got bolder. So the New York Times likes to say democracy dies in the dark. Well, where were they in Hong Kong when they were engaged in self-censorship, and now Hong Kong has fallen to the Chinese Communist Party? Where are they now? So don't forever for a second take it that we can always have our democracy, always have our rights. You've got to fight for those every single day.
That was a good point, and that was a good analogy. In fact, I think, wasn't Hong Kong always referred to as the jewel in the economic crown? I mean, Hong Kong was something that's always been held up as a great example of,
Hong Kong. It's a shame for those who didn't get to go to Hong Kong when it was free. It was a thriving city-state. Again, it was one of the freest economies in the world, if not the freest. It had a very high average income level. I mean, it was the jewel of Asia. It was the financial hub for all of Asia. That will probably now go to maybe Singapore, maybe Taiwan, or elsewhere, but can no longer be Hong Kong. And the United States and other nations have now said that Hong Kong is no longer autonomous. We're canceling trade deals because now when we trade with Hong Kong, it's in essence we're trading with the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. It's an absolute shame. Equated this to Dayton land. Some people might be cheering this as if we're appeasing China, giving them what they want. Don't be fooled. This is only going to have negative repercussions for us moving forward in the years and perhaps decades ahead. But we've done nothing but embolden the Chinese Communist Party. So who's next? Is Taiwan next? New Zealand? How much further are the Chinese going to expand in the South Pacific? That's a really big problem for us, both economically and militarily. Not only as China gets more aggressive in the South China Sea, but as they start isolating our allies. So we should all be concerned, and why this is not being why this is not being centered in our national news media is beyond me, because this is a huge blow to the Western world that cannot be minimized.
That's interesting when you mention our media, because I did notice reading up on it that the British media is on top of it and have been very concerned. And it makes sense, of course, but still, ours has been sadly lacking.
Well, I think one of the reasons why ours has been sadly lacking is because these big conglomerates want to appease the Chinese Communist Party. You have a lot of the news organizations that are owned by Disney, and Disney wants to be able to have access to those markets, despite the fact that Chinese engage in intellectual property theft and piracy, etc. But they'll do anything to appease the Chinese Communist Party to get access. What really is sickening is you have social media platforms that will take off anti-Chinese Communist Party comments, and what they're doing is they're censoring the Western world, because newsflash, there's no social media in China, and if it is, it's very limited. It's controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. So it's the Western companies that are censoring themselves, censoring the West, and doing the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party. Much like the journalists I met with when I was in Hong Kong and Beijing and elsewhere when I was traveling throughout Asia, who told me they're engaged in self-censorship. So it's time for them to remember why they're there, and that's to bring truth and transparency. It's time for them to do their jobs, just not our news outlets or our newspapers, but also these platforms. They should not be allowed to censor anti-communist statements on these platforms. And if they're engaged in censorship, then the law needs to treat them as if they're publishers, not platforms. I'll stop on that diatribe because I'll bore you to death with some.
No, you're not boring me. No.
But let me just dive down there. Here's the thing. In law, the distinction is this: are you a platform or are you a publisher? If you're a platform, think of it as in a college dorm room where you go on and you tack something on a board, right? That's a platform. The board isn't there regulating what's on it. A publisher would be writing into a paper and then deciding what articles to publish, what letters the editor publish, etc. There's two different standards in law if you're a platform or a publisher. These social media companies want to say they're a platform because they get all these benefits from the law. But if they're acting like a publisher, which they are, then we need to apply the set of law that applies to them as a publisher, because they have a much different standard than if they're just a platform. So they can't have it both ways. They're going to have to make up their mind what you want. Facebook wants to go to and appear as a true platform, but you have Twitter and others that want to go and be publishers. So, but thankfully, President Trump is looking at this, and I think we should take legislative action to make them decide which they are. We need to update our laws.
Is there an executive order, or he's looking at an executive order? Because I thought I just read something about targeting Twitter, as a matter of fact, and because right now they can't, as you said, can't be held responsible. And and I think he's absolutely right to focus on Twitter, for example, in that case.
He is. It's just not Twitter. It's about updating the law and seeing how it applies to these platforms or publishers, whatever you want to call it. But if they're engaged in publishing, then they're going to be liable. They're going to be liable for slander and defamation, etc. That's what we really need to look into. And there's different standards that apply through regulations. Again, I don't want to get I don't want to bore people, but there's a big difference legally and under regulation for which way they are. So. Yeah.
No, thank you for clarifying that. Because it was something new, and I had just been starting to do some research on it, and I wasn't quite sure. So I appreciate your clarification on that. Real quick, I want to mention I was, we recently had the primary, and I was out there working the polls, and I saw a lot of young people, and I love talking to young people. And I asked them, what do you think about what's going on right now? I want to tell you something, Congressman. So many of them told me they were really concerned for their future, which I thought, good, because you need to think about your future. What can you say to those young people? Because when you look at everything that's happening right now, and things seem like they're so out of control. We talked about Hong Kong. We talked about social media and trying to recover and get back on their feet again. You look at the whole big picture, and it doesn't look good. It looks bleak. Is there a word you have for these young people?
Well, first off, don't blame anybody for your problems. There's been a lot of folks that have inherited bad situations or come into bad situations. They don't make excuses. They take ownership and then they move forward. So you might be out there with heavy student loans. I know I certainly was. You might be out there with fighting some unemployment issues. Look, stop making excuses and be productive. Make yourself valuable in the marketplace. Also, politically, get engaged. If you look around the world, it was the Hong Kongers that were fighting for their freedom were millennials. It was Generation Z. Those in Venezuela that are rallying against the Hugo Chavez regime, well, now the Maduro regime, they were the ones that were supporting President Guaido. President Guaido is roughly my age, right? He's an older millennial. The youth is the one that's going to make the changes, and it's imperative upon you, Generation Z and the millennials, to make these changes, because we're going to be the ones that inherit the future. We're going to be around to either reap the benefits or the negatives for what decisions are being made today. So get involved and realize the decisions that are being made at any level, state, federal, local, those are going to really impact your life. So you've got to get involved. You've got to push back against government encroachment. And you need to push for sound economic policy so that you do have a good paying job in the future. So this is very real. Get off of the couch and join us in this fight.
Yeah. Oh, that's well said. And listen, I know you guys, you're anxious to get back to work. Nancy Pelosi keeps pushing when the heck are you going to get back to work and do the job for the American people? I know you're anxious to do so. When is this going to happen?
Well, I'm itching to get back to DC. There's no question. And look, we are working from the district. I'm actually busier in a lot of ways than normal. So I want to get that out of the way. But when we're working from the district, we're focused on constituent service issues. There's not too much that we can do legislative wise because we're not face to face. We're not in committees. So when we're home, that power, the legislative power, shifts to leadership and leadership staff. So although I think the world of Kevin McCarthy and Liz Cheney and Steve Scalise, I want to be there representing my district. I don't want leadership staff. On the Democrats, and by the way, the three of them agree. They want to be back in DC. I was just on a call with them. Now, on the Democrat side, Nancy Pelosi, I feel, wants people to stay in their districts because it gives her the ability to consolidate power. She can make all the decisions. Her staff can do it. And Nancy Pelosi has some real issues in what we would call the Democrat conference, right? She's got AOC, Tlaib, and Omar, these far left freshmen who are always pushing to move the party left. I think that Nancy Pelosi actually likes that, but she has to deal with this turmoil in the party. When they're not there in DC, she doesn't have to deal with it. Her staff can draft all the legislation. She bypasses the committee process. She disenfranchises not only Republicans but her own party. And then we come back for this roll call vote where it's an up or down. We vote yes or no. I want to shape this policy. I've got legislation I want run, but I can't do it if I'm not face to face. I'm not working through committees.
Yeah, and you make a good point, and that's why we wanted you there. We want you to be a part of all of that, and so that precludes you from doing that, and that's unfortunate. So when is she going to allow? When will she say it's okay to go back to DC?
Well, so right now, and the speaker controls the calendar, right? So right now, Speaker Pelosi has a slated to come back on June 30th. So that would mean we're something like 4 or 5 weeks away from being back in session. And then the committees that are meeting via Zoom and Skype and teleconference. Well, good luck having a hearing if you can't interrogate a witness who's testifying before your committee face to face. I know we're doing this by Zoom or Skype. I get it. But it's not the same as actually being there face to face and talking to a witness, because you don't see, and also you don't get any of the body language from the other members. It's very difficult to do this through Zoom and Skype. And there's a constitutional argument to it. The Constitution is very explicit. It says that we have to have a quorum that's present. Well, to me, present means we're in DC voting, not that we're at home on a Zoom call. There's a reason for that. So I think that any legislation, there's a challenge going on right now in the courts on this, but I would be willing to bet that if there is legislation that's passed without a quorum being present in DC, that's going to be subject to legal challenge as well. So this is a true mess, and Nancy Pelosi has caused the vast majority of it when it comes to how the House is being handled right now in terms of administrative function.
Wow. Who would have thought this, right? You never would have imagined your first term, but you're doing a great job. Oh my gosh. And we're anxious for you to continue to represent us. And we know that you will. We know you'll be there for a while, and we need you to be there for a while. So thank you for everything that you're doing. And I appreciate you taking the time out to talk to Southwestern PA, to talk specifically to the 14th district, but in general, I know that others have said they enjoyed hearing what you had to say. I actually have friends across the country or listeners that will write and say, "Oh my gosh, I really like that guy Reschenthaler." So that's cool.
Well, thanks, Rose. Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for all you do, because I can tell you, if it wasn't for the alternative media, right? If it wasn't for talk radio and everything that you do with your program and others, we would have very little chance to get out the conservative message. We would be beholden to the mainstream media, which, as we see, is not always on the side of freedom and democracy. So thanks for all you to move the conservative agenda forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you, darling. It's good to talk to you, Congressman. Keep up the good work. Appreciate you.
You do.